We're glad you could join us for another edition of the Indosoft Web Studio video training series. Today in this video we're going to cover specific SQL statements and how to put those into VB script. We're going to configure the database/ERP worksheet and connect to an MS Access database that we created in a previous video with these statements and through this worksheet. So let's go ahead and see what we're going to cover in this one. We're going to configure a connection using the database/ERP connection, and this will give us a named way to connect to a specific database. Unlike what we've done in the previous database videos where we connected to a Microsoft Access or a SQL database specifically using the default database connection and then use that throughout the objects such as the trend or the various features within Indosoft Web Studio such as the trend, the grid object, some of the alarms and the events. This one we're going to create a named connection and then be able to use that with specific SQL statements by using VB script, in this case on buttons, but it doesn't have to be on buttons. We're going to show you how to use the output window to do some basic troubleshooting and use the database worksheet to provide a simplified way to gain access to databases as well. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is, or before I got started on this video, I went in and created an SQL screen by opening up our template screen, saving that as SQL, and then giving myself some navigation to that. I copied one of these buttons down, changed the screen that it goes to, and changed the text on the button. So now that we have this screen, we're going to go ahead and first we're going to create a connection to a database. So in order to do that, I'm going to right click here on database. I'm going to expand this and go to the connections drop down here and right click on this and click on insert. This is very similar to the default database connection that we created in previous videos. We're going to create a connection string here in just a moment, but we're going to name this. In this case, I'm just going to call this simply DB. Remember that. It's going to end up showing up down here, but we're going to reference that later on. I'm going to then browse to create a connection string. Now in the past videos we created SQL Server connection, and then we used the Microsoft Access database connection as well. We're going to go back to that Access database, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Next here. Now to get to that, I'm going to bring this from off screen here. We're in our training project. We have the mydb.accdb that we created in one of the first database videos. So if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and follow through that video and create that database that used the alarms and event tables within that. And so now to point to that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat here a little bit and get the string out of here to point to that path. And I'm going to copy that, put that off screen, go ahead and paste this in here. And then that's mydb.accdb. And then I should be able to test that connection. So yep, I know I'm talking to that, so my security is right. Everything is set there. Click on OK. And again, we have that as a named connection now. And click on OK. And now what we should see is that named connection to that database. So now that we've got that named, we can go ahead and put some VB script on to use some SQL statements to get right into that database. Just as a reminder, and I'll try to remind you during the video, but at any point you can pause this video to copy or at least read off of the screen the scripts that I have on the screen, so we can you can follow along. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some buttons on the screen. Now these don't have to be on buttons, but to make it easier to execute, I'm going to put some buttons here on the screen so we can show you what's going on. The first button, what we're going to do is we're going to create a table in that database. So we're going to label this button Create Table. And the command for that, what we're going to do is we're going to declare a variable. So I'm going to dim SQL as a VB script variable. Now VB script variables can take on whatever data that you put at them. They're type variant by default, and so what we're going to do is we're going to build this SQL statement by using this variable SQL equals, and then inside of double quotes I'm going to build this statement: create table my table. Now that, just to show you, I will go ahead and open up that database. I'll pull this off screen. I'll open that database up. We can see in here that there's no table called My Table in there. It has the alarm history and the event history from the previous video, but I'll move that off screen. And let's see, I can move that off screen as well. So I'm going to create my table within that database. Now, how we're going to use this is, what I'm going to do is call an InduSoft function that will execute the database command, and we're going to do $, which will be an InduSoft built-in function, db execute. Okay, so here, after the db execute, we're going to put in parentheses, and we can see that we can use that named connection and then the SQL statement in a string. So here what we're going to do is put in double quotes db, that'll reference this database connection over here, and then comma, and then we're going to use the SQL variable from above. I'll close that. And now we should be able to create that table within this database. So let's give this a try. We will save this and run. And before I execute this statement, let me go ahead and pull up that Access database. We can see that we have no table in there named My Table. I'll go ahead and create that table. I'll pull the database down in here. I will refresh this by hitting F5, and now we can see we have a table called My Table. The next thing that I'm going to do, we'll try to create another table called My Table. So before I do that, I want to go ahead and delete this table and say yes to that. Move that back off the screen. And then we want to go in and change this button to give it a little bit different functionality. Here under the SQL screen, we're going to go ahead and change this to create the table My Table, but now we're going to insert a couple of columns here. So we're going to use open parenthesis, column 1 as an integer, so I'm just going to type int in there, comma, and then column 2 as a string. So the type that needs is going to be NVAR, and then inside of parentheses the size of the string. In this case it's going to be 32, and I'm going to close the other parenthesis to match this one over here. So I have column 1 as an integer, column 2 as a string, up to 32 characters. So now when we do this, go ahead and save this and run. I can go ahead and issue that create table, and now it's going to create it with those two columns. I deleted that previously, so now I can go in here and hit F5. You should see My Table. Double click on that, and there's the two different columns that we just created. I'm going to take that back off screen and try to do some other stuff with this. So let's go back in to our development environment. Okay, so now we're going to go back in and change that button, or make a copy of it and change what that button does. This particular button, we're going to go back to the button, and this time we're going to insert data with it. And the command is, the SQL command is going to change, and SQL statement is going to change just a little bit here. Let me go just to make sure that I have this exactly correct. I'm going to go off screen and copy it from my notes and paste it in here. And again, you can, I'll explain this, but you can pause this video at any time if you want to go ahead and type this in. So I'm just going to change that SQL statement to insert into My Table values of 100. That'll be in column 1. And ABC. Now notice there's single quotes or apostrophes around that. Most SQL databases need single quotes around that, not double quotes. Close the parenthesis, close the double quote. Hopefully I'll remember during the production of this video to zoom in on this and let you see that a little bit. But other than that, the only thing that we've changed in there really is the SQL statement, and left all the other stuff the same. So we're going to go ahead and insert values into that table. This training video is not meant to teach you SQL commands themselves, but you should be able to find some references on the internet to be able to learn that. We're going to support those SQL commands right in here. So go ahead and click on OK. Close this screen. Click on yes. Run this, and now once we launch this, we should be able to insert data into those tables, and I'll bring this back off screen. I will refresh the screen by hitting F5 on my database, and I can see that. I'll go back onto my InduSoft Web Studio application, click on that 3 or 4 times, come back in here, and you can see that I've entered that many rows or that many records into that database. So that's as easy as that gets. Now let's move on to something else here. What we'll do is in this, we will change this ABC to be something slightly different. We'll change that to uppercase ABC 1, 2, 3. And now when we run this, I'll go ahead and click on that and insert that data. And now when I come back and refresh this, you can see that that's changed that to 1, 2, 3. So you can see how easy and flexible that is. Now, coming back in here to the development environment, under SQL, I will copy this button down. And this time we're going to change this button to, instead of inserting data, we're going to insert tags. So we'll be able to grab data right from tags and do this. So instead of putting the actual values right in here, what I'm going to do is get rid of everything that's inside of those parentheses. And now we're going to build some strings that will allow us to show some values from tags in here, or not show, but insert. So what I'm going to do is start off with double quote, a space, an ampersand, another space, and then $SECOND. Now that'll allow us to insert the seconds clock directly into this from the tag second, from the built-in InduSoft system tag. And then after that, I will concatenate using the ampersand again, and another space, close the quote, and that's the first value that I'm going to put in there. So that's going to have that seconds in the first column, and then I'm going to put a comma, and then after that, the next one is going to be a string, so I need to start with a single quote, a double quote, a space, an ampersand, another space, and then $time. So that's the time tag. That'll put the time in there, but that's going to be a string type tag. Put another space, an ampersand, and then double quote, and then to end it all off, in this case I'll put a space and I'll put a single quote at the end. So those single quotes are encompassing essentially that string from time that goes in there from the time tag. So I have double quote, space, single quote, close parenthesis, close double quote. Now, in order to build all that, and again, you should pause this video if you want to try to follow that along. Now we can save this, and now when I run this, it should insert the seconds value into the first column, and then the total time in the second column. So let's give this a try. Go ahead and run SQL, insert tags, and now what I should be able to do is come down here and again refresh this by hitting F5. I can see the value of 6 is the seconds. The seconds got put into that column, but then all the time, hours, minutes, and seconds got put into there as well. So that worked. Take that back off screen, and now what we're going to do is copy that button down again and change it slightly. I'll exit out of this. Back in the SQL screen, copy that down here. Now this one, instead of inserting tags, we're going to update data. So I'm going to go back here, change this to update data, and change the command on here. Now this one is going to be a little bit different, and again I'm going to go off screen and copy this, save a little bit of time, and then just paste this in, replacing this string here. So this is going to update my table in the set where column 2, and this is single quotes, and we put an extra space in here just to make this a little bit more readable. Single quotes around ABC 1, 2, 3, and it's going to replace wherever it finds that in column 2, and it's going to replace column 1 and put the value 200 into column 1 wherever it finds that. So let's briefly go look to see where we have ABC 1, 2, 3 in the database. And right now we have that in one particular spot. You know what? Let's go ahead and add that or insert a few more records with that. So let's go ahead and run this real quick here again. And we can insert data a couple more times, 2, 3, come down here and go ahead and refresh that. Oops, 5 to refresh. And not sure what I just did. I hit a wrong key. There we go. F5. So now we have this record up here, and then these three records down here that have ABC 1, 2, 3 in the column 2. So let's again take that off screen and double check what I have in that update data just to make sure that I have the right stuff in there. Again, we're gonna, wherever we find in column 2 ABC 1, 2, 3, we're gonna update column 1 with the value 200. So we'll go ahead and run that and update that data. I'll click on that once, pull this down here, and you can see that refresh that all those values change. Wherever there was 100 in there before, it now has 200. Wherever column 2 has ABC 1, 2, 3 in it. So that worked. And now what we'll do is go back into here, and guess what? We're going to add another button onto the screen. In this case, copy this down. This one's going to be delete data. And on this button, the command, we're going to change this to, again, I'm going to copy this from off screen, make this a little bit quicker here. Delete from my table where C2 is equal to ABC 1, 2, 3. And again, that's single quotes around the ABC 1, 2, 3, and a double quote at the end to match this beginning one here. So once we do that, should be able to run this. And now we can delete data. Click on that once, bring my database back in here, and refresh, and we can see all those records where ABC 1, 2, 3 was in there. We've deleted those records, so that's pretty easy to do. Now the next button that we're going to do is a little bit more complicated, and so I'm going to walk through that here. And I'm going to copy this button up here and change the text on here. Now this one's going to be called Select Data. And what we're going to do in this one, I'm going to start most of this over from scratch, but in fact, let's just do that. We're going to declare not only the SQL variable, but we're going to create a new one called numCur and another one called numRows. And then we'll also create one called row. And let's see, do we even use, I'm looking at this, and yep, go here. And now in here, the SQL string or variable, we will set equal to select star. In this case, it's going to be select all from my table. So we're going to select all the records from my table, and what we're going to do is build a record set, or bring in a record set. And in order to do that, we're going to have to give it a name or a handle. So we're going to call that numCur, and this is going to be a cursor, so to speak, into that connection. So what we're going to do is use that connection to do DB cursor open SQL, and see the IntelliSense here is feeding me what that is. And that's a built-in Indusoft scripting language. You can read more about that in the help. But in order to do that, we're going to give it that connection string and or the name of the connection, which was the one over here under tasks that we call DB. So we need to put that in here in double quotes DB, close double quotes, comma, and then again the SQL string from above. And now once we've done that, we're going to be able to read the number of rows out of that data set or record set. In this case, we're going to use numRows equals, and now we're going to use another built-in Indusoft script function called DB cursor row count, and that's going to return the number of rows in that current record set. And in here, we're going to use the handle that we created up here to reference that data set, which would be numCur. And now that we've pointed into that, now that we know the number of rows, let me make sure that I spell rows correctly. Now that we have the number of rows in there, now we're going to create a for next loop to go through each individual row and read the values out of that. So here I'm going to type in a for next loop, and so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and put in next down here. And so we're going to do for row equals 1 to the number of rows that we returned in that previous statement. And so that's going to, if I could type here, num rows. So now we're going to go through that many times. And this will be flexible enough that however long this record set is, to go through it that number of times. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build up a string as we read row by row and the values from each of those columns. We're going to build that up, and at the end we're going to display that in a message box. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a variable called text, which I don't have declared up here, so let's go ahead and do that, txt. And then we're going to set text equal to whatever text was before. So the first time through this is going to be empty, but as we go through this, we're going to continue to build and build and build on this. And then we're going to put an ampersand in here, which will concatenate what's to come next. Put a space after that, $, db cursor get value. And what that'll do is get the value from that record set, which we're going to reference as num cur. And so we have that handle into that record set, and then we're going to read from C1 and put that inside of double quotes and then close the parenthesis. So that reads that column 1 value and puts it into the text variable. We're going to continue to build on that text variable, and we're going to set that what it was equal to before, and we're going to do and instead of a $, an ampersand I should say. And now we're going to, in order to format this a little bit, I'm going to put a comma and a space between each of those column 1 and column 2 values. And now we're going to put in an ampersand and then the same db cursor get value. So that's $db cursor get value. I can pull that from IntelliSense down here. And similar to what we did before above, we're going to use the num cur handle, and we're going to pull in column 2. And after that, we're going to use the built-in constant into VB script, concatenate VB carriage return and line feed after that. So we're going to drop down a line, and then we're going to use the built-in script db cursor next. And after that, we're going to point to numcur, and that will point us to the next row. We'll go through this next as many rows as there is, and then continually read each of those rows and build this string into the text variable here. So now that we have gone through that, however many rows that we have, we're going to go ahead and close that cursor. So I'm going to use the $db cursor close function. And what that'll do is release the memory that's been associated with this record set. If we don't do this, and this is pretty important, if we don't do that, it will keep that record set in memory, and eventually, if you keep opening and opening and opening, eventually you'll fill up fill up your memory in the computer. So we need to reference that handle, num cur, and that will close that. And the very next thing that we need to do is show a message box, which is a built-in, not a built-in, it's a VB script function, msgbox, and then we're going to display the value of txt in that. So we've gone through this, a number of rows that there are, and we've built and read all the record sets. We've read column 1, column 2. We've put a comma and a space between them and a carriage return and line feed after every line, gone and gotten the next record, so on and so forth, and built that up into text. And we should be able to show that when we're all done. So, cross our fingers, hope this works first try. And if I didn't point this out before, here in the settings, we need to make sure that we have database messages and insert date and time. That'll show us any errors that we have in the database connection. So go ahead and run this. And go to our SQL screen, select the data, and there we go. We've read all the data from all those rows and displayed it in this message box with a comma and a space between them. So click on OK, click on Exit, and click on yes. And now what we'd like to do is force an error, so I can show you an error in this output window. So I'm going to go back in here, and under the insert data, what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposefully mess up the insert. So here I'm going to do insert AAA, and that's not a valid SQL statement. So I'm going to close this and save the changes. Notice here in the output window we have that as empty. I'm going to go ahead and click on Run. And now when I issue that insert data, if I go back to the log win, I can see that it's an invalid SQL statement. And I can put my cursor on here, and I'm using my arrow keys on my keyboard to arrow over. You can see insert AAA. It's pointing that out, that that's not a valid SQL statement. So there you have a little bit of troubleshooting and how to build a connection into that database and read a record set and work your way through that using the cursor commands and built-in scripting within Indusoft Web Studio. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. And at this point, what we're going to do is now switch gears a little bit, and instead of using the VB script as a way to get into there, I'm going to use a different mechanism. So here under the database ERP, now that we have that connection established and we've been working with that DB connection, I'm going to right click and insert a database worksheet. And now we can choose and work with that same database here, and we have a choice of working with a table. In a minute I'm going to come back to this and put in the my table within that MS Access database. I can also show you here that we can choose SQL commands and put SQL statements right in here as well. But instead I'm going to keep the my table, or the table, and you point to my table within that Access database. And now what we need to do is, in order to get, let's say we're going to get column 1, I need to put that into a tag name. So I'll call it SQL C1. And because that column 1 is an integer, I'm going to go ahead and create that as an integer. And now I need a way to trigger that. So here I'm going to create a tag called select. And that tag does not exist. I'm going to go ahead and make that a Boolean. And then I need a way to move to the next record, so we'll call that next tag. And because that's just going to be a trigger and I need to change that, we'll create that as a Boolean as well. So now I need a way to toggle these tags and show that tag name on the screen. So I'll go ahead and close this, save this, sheet number 1, and back on our screen we need a way to show that data. So we'll put in here C1 and then just some pound signs and tie that to that tag which we just put in there, which was, go ahead and hit the letter S on my keyboard, jump down to SQL C1. That's from that worksheet we just created. And then below this I need a way to issue those select buttons in the next. So let's do this. Or select, let me state that again. I need a way to toggle the select tag and the next tag. So this one is going to be select. And the command, we'll change this to toggle tag. And I'll pull that from the list. I'm just going to type in S here. Will get me down to the S's, select. And I didn't have to close that, but copy that over. Change this to the tag next tag. And change the text on here to next. And so now what this will do is point into that same database and read the value from column 1, and then next we'll just keep going down that list of those. So what I'm going to do, just to get some different data in here, I'm going to pull our database back down in here, and I'm going to manually go ahead and change some values in here. So we'll change this to 1, 2, 3. Change this one to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the last one we'll leave at 6. So that should be good enough. So we have 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll go ahead and save that. I don't know if I need to, but just in case. And now we can go ahead and run this. And once we're running here, I can go back in, select that. I get my first value is 100. I move to the next. I get the 1, 2, 3. Next, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the last one should be 6, which was in there. So That's pretty much everything that I wanted to show you about using SQL statements in VB script, using that database ERP connection, a way to get in there. And hopefully you learned something from this and now make your applications much more data intensive and get the information you need, and make your product or your project a little bit more efficient. Thank you and have a great day.